When I finally came to in that stark hospital room, my body hanging by a thread, the first words out of my mouth were, "Did my parents come?" The nurse didn't respond. She turned her head, avoiding my gaze, her expression heavy with sympathy. I had spent 3 days in a coma, 3 long days straddling the edge of death, following a brutal car crash that left my ribs broken, my spine fractured, and my heart barely functioning. 3 days in which not a single member of my so-called family appeared. Not my mother. Not my father. And certainly not my golden child brother, Mason. Backhand index pointing right. Please subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments. Where are you watching from? The nurse eventually told me the truth. It wasn't my family who saved me. It was my neighbor, a 74-year-old woman who happened to see me unconscious, collapsed behind the wheel of my car in the freezing cold. She called for an ambulance. She stayed by my side until the paramedics arrived. She even visited me while I recovered. But my own parents? The people who raised me? They didn't even pick up the phone to ask if I was alive. And this wasn't new. It wasn't shocking. In hindsight, I should have expected it. I was always the outsider in my own home, the inconvenient child, the burden. I was the daughter who disrupted their retirement dreams, the one who cost too much with chronic asthma treatments, the one who didn't marry rich like her successful brother. Every important event in my life, graduating, renting my first apartment, launching my little art business, was met with silence, indifference. Meanwhile, Mason was celebrated for doing nothing at all. He wrecked 2 cars, and they handed him keys to a third. He dropped out of college, and they praised him for pursuing his passion, like he was some misunderstood prodigy. But this was different. They let me die. I didn't have insurance. My art barely covered rent, let alone hospital bills. When the hospital administration asked if I had any family who could help, I gave them my father's number. When they called him, he said, and I quote, "If she's still breathing, she'll figure it out. She's always wanted to be independent." They didn't just abandon me, they left me to fend for myself in the darkest moment of my life. But while I lay in that sterile white room, lungs struggling, bones aching, something inside me shifted. Or maybe something long buried finally woke up. And I made myself a promise. If I survived this, I would never let them take another piece of me. Not time, not money, not love. Nothing. When I was finally released, I had a mountain of debt, deep purple bruises across half my body, and a cane to help me walk. I returned to my tiny studio apartment, thankfully prepaid for 6 months, and I began to plot my future. Then fate did something strange. Just as I prepared to crawl my way out alone, I received a call from a lawyer. My great-aunt, someone I had only met a couple of times, had passed away and named me in her will. She had always been kind to me, her voice warm, her eyes filled with something I never received from my own parents, recognition. She'd been following my art in secret, supporting my work from afar. And in the end, she left it all to me, her estate, her properties, her savings. When I walked into the lawyer's office that following Monday, I was still limping from the crash, bruises still fading. But I held my head high. They handed me a folder, thick, legal, almost overwhelming. Inside were the full details of a fortune I never knew existed. My great-aunt Evelyn had lived quietly, but wisely. She'd built wealth carefully and trusted almost no one. Especially not people like my parents. Her estate included a vineyard in Northern California, several rental properties in Oregon, and over $3 million in diversified investments. She left every bit of it to me. And in her handwritten letter, just one sentence, one beautiful, heartbreaking line. To the only one in this family who has known suffering and still chose compassion, may this help you heal and build your own legacy. Leave the rest behind. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't need to. I quietly paid off every cent of my medical bills. I ended the lease on my old apartment. I flew out to see the vineyard, my vineyard now, and as I walked between the rows of grapes, I felt like I was breathing for the first time. Then Mason messaged me. "Hey, heard you're alive. Mom says you're being dramatic and ignoring everyone." "No, how are you?" "No, glad you're okay." Just entitlement. Arrogance. The same toxic energy I'd spent my life surrounded by. I didn't reply. Not yet. The next time I saw my parents wasn't by choice, they showed up. I had quietly listed one of Aunt Evelyn's beachfront condos for sale, and apparently, they recognized the address. When I opened the door, I said nothing. My father's eyes widened as he took in the marble floors. My mother blinked at the designer furniture. "Whose place is this?" she asked. I wanted to say, "Mine." But instead, I just smiled and asked, "Can I help you?" They pretended to care, at first. "Over the top sweet." My mother gushed. "We've been so worried. You look amazing." "That dress is stunning. Is it designer?" I served tea in delicate gold-rimmed cups, imported from France. But their masks didn't last. Dad leaned forward. "We spoke with Mason. He mentioned you might have inherited something." "Your aunt passed, right?" Mom chimed in. "Such a sweet woman. Always liked you. Anyway, you know your father and I were probably her closest relatives, after you. We assumed she'd divide the estate. Maybe you can just transfer our part." I stared at them in disbelief. No apology. No guilt. Nothing about leaving me to die. Just hands out. I looked them both in the eye and said, "You weren't there when I nearly died. You didn't ask if I was alive. And now you want a share of what she gave me." Silence. Then my father snapped. "Don't be selfish. We raised you. You owe us." That was it. The final break. I walked to the fireplace, pulled out Aunt Evelyn's original letter, and handed it to my mother. She left everything to me. No division. No debate. And in case you're wondering, I sold her stocks last week and bought a business. My mom frowned. "What business?" "The one you always mocked me for dreaming about. My art collective. I bought a building downtown." I stepped closer, lowered my voice, and whispered, "And that's just the beginning." I let Karen go from her position as gallery manager. She never liked me, and frankly, the feeling had been mutual for a long time. But I wasn't finished. My parents left that day in a rage, storming out the door, but not before my father turned to spit venom over his shoulder. "You're going to regret cutting us off. When Mason gets the house and everything with it, don't come crawling back." I didn't flinch. I smiled and replied, "You'll be the ones crawling. Because that house? It was already mine. They just didn't know it yet." As days turned into weeks, something rare settled in my life: peace. Not just the absence of chaos, but a hard-earned quiet, built one emotional stone at a time. I had rebuilt myself from the inside out, far from the grip of guilt and emotional blackmail that used to smother me. But peace rarely lasts forever, especially when the past refuses to stay buried. It started with a voicemail from Mason. "Hey, they're selling the family house. Mom and Dad are losing it. Something about back taxes or foreclosure. Not my problem though. I'm moving in with Claire. Just figured you should know." But I already knew, because I was the one who set it all in motion. When Aunt Evelyn passed everything down to me, she didn't just hand me assets, she handed me quiet power. Legal leverage. Hidden inside one of her trusts was full ownership of a private lending firm. And 5 years ago, my parents had taken out a second mortgage against the house, a loan they never repaid. They assumed it was handled by some nameless bank that forgot them. What they didn't know was that I had acquired that debt. One document. One signature. And suddenly, I owned the mortgage on their home. So no, they weren't being evicted by some cold corporation. They were being evicted by the daughter they had left to die in a hospital. I waited until moving day to appear. When I pulled onto the street, my father was pacing the lawn, red-faced and screaming at the moving crew. My mother sat on the porch, weeping into a tissue like she was auditioning for sympathy. I didn't arrive in my old rusted sedan that had been sold long ago. I drove up in a sleek charcoal electric SUV. Tailored navy suit. Hair pulled back. Chin held high. The moment she saw me, my mother gasped. "You?" My father stomped toward me. "What the hell are you doing here? Come to enjoy the show." I held up a simple white envelope. "This is your official notice. The deed now belongs to a charitable trust one manage. This house is being converted into a safe haven, a shelter for runaway and abused girls. Girls like the one they abandoned." They both stood frozen. My father's fists clenched. "You can't do this. This is our home." "No," I said gently. "It was. Now it's theirs." I turned to a small group gathered by the sidewalk, girls with haunted eyes, some bruised, one holding a baby. A social worker stood beside them. These girls knew fear. They knew survival. They reminded me of me. You're doing this to hurt us, my mother choked. No, I replied, stepping closer. I'm doing this so I can survive. I grew up in a house where love came with conditions, where silence was the price of peace. You weren't there when I needed you. So now, I'm giving this place to someone who will be. They looked again at the girls, and then at me. That's when the panic set in. Not anger. Not pride. Just raw, desperate fear. Please, my mother whispered. We have nowhere to go. I didn't respond with cruelty. I spoke with clarity. You used to tell me I'd never be worth anything unless I had a job. That I was a drain. A disappointment. Well, I got a job. I built something. I inherited more than you ever imagined. I climbed. And you don't get to hold on to me now. That day, they walked away with nothing but the bags they once flung onto the sidewalk for me. The same sidewalk I had once sobbed on when they cast me out. Poetic, isn't it? Weeks later, the shelter officially opened its doors. It wasn't just a building. It was a statement, carved in brick and lined with hope. That you don't need acceptance to be worthy. Reporters came. Donations flooded in. I stood at the ribbon cutting beside young women who had lived stories that sounded far too familiar. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't telling a story of pain. I was telling a story of purpose. Then came one last twist. The night before the grand opening, I received a letter. Handwritten. Inside was a note and an old photo, a photo of me unconscious in a hospital bed, and next to me, a woman holding my hand. The note read, "They left after 5 minutes. But I stayed with you all night. I was your nurse. I just wanted you to know. You were never truly alone." I didn't cry for the abandonment anymore. I cried for the healing. Because my story didn't end in betrayal. It ended in rebirth. And they were just the prologue.